gentlemen, I am so pleased and honored to welcome my dear friend Phynne Belle, poet, artist, a producer, just an extraordinary person, so engaged in the poetic and literary community. She's hosting events all the time. She helps other people host events. She helps publicize people's events. What I absolutely have to call a poet's poet, an artist's artist, and just a tremendous human being. Thank you so much, Phynne, for joining us.
The pleasure and the honors are mine, honestly. It's always lovely to sit down with you.
Well, as always with Poets of the East, we start with a series of questions, mostly
Mhm.
aimed at getting to know you better, learning a little something about the poet, the human behind the poetry, behind the artistry. Um, I always like to ask, even though we've talked before, I think it's always nice to start fresh. When did you really start writing?
When should I start writing? That is a question I often get asked. And, if I were to say, when did I start writing actively, that would have been 2000. But if we delve a little deeper, I think this desire, this desire, this calling to tell a story to the world started very, very early in my life. And I know that I have told this tale about my childhood, quite a few times, maybe not to you, but I do remember this instance when I was younger. My sister's also a writer, so she did these sort of things too. She would make stories out of our immediate surroundings, or make it into a playtime. And I don't know if you remember that old. They used to have this cough drop, or sort of like throat lozenge, called Sucrets. We had an empty one, and that my mom discarded, and she made it into a sort of like little Hello Kitty stationery box. And then she made a drawing of this this character called Pepper, who's a pup, I believe, or Pepper and something. And I remember making a back story for the lives of these anthropomorphic characters, and then I realized that that wasn't the only story I would do. Every time um, we would have story time, we would engage in playtime actually. There would be this big background story that I would create beforehand. Sometimes I would write it down. Sometimes I would just sit in the kitchen and tell my mom, well, this is what happens. I know that is a wonderful part of building um, one's oneself, or one's childhood, and and formation in the formative years. But for me, that was really it did lend a lot of that childhood, that being able to tell those stories and be received so wonderfully, especially by my mom. She would be an avid listener, was super helpful, and I think that was for me that point where I began so-called the writing, even though I wasn't actually knowledgeable about yet. That was before I was able to, learn how to read and write. But I think that was the little seed right there.
When I was about 8, I was given a small
Hmm.
tape recorder, and I would go around the neighborhood, ask relatives, and record little interviews with them, because I've always felt that everyone has something to teach. Everyone has a story to tell.
Hmm.
Everyone can teach us something about their life, about the world, and we would be wiser if we listened. So I had all this huge collection of little tapes, and I enjoyed that and storytelling along with it. Of course, I did my own show like you did. I love the Sue Crest can. That was a great idea. Okay, next question. Even when you were young, obviously a person with your mind, the storytelling of children, the fabling of we hear as children. Which do you remember any authors that made a big impression on you when you were just a child?
Um, that's a wonderful question, because when I think of children's authors, I think of um, what I actually wasn't exposed to and what I actually was able to enjoy and delve into um, as I got older. When I was younger, I never was the child who uh, checked out or knew about or nobody told me about, stories of Roald Dahl, um, or stories by you know uh, Judy Blume. And then now, as I'm older, I'm saying, oh, these are things that I missed in my childhood. Let me go back and and visit them for the first time. And whoa, I even in my adulthood, I never read The Little Prince when I was little, and I decided I wanted to curate a set of books that I wanted to share with my son during his childhood. And so we went to a trip to the Philippines several years back. I got The Little Prince for him, and wow, what a universe. So I wish I had those in my childhood. Not to say that there wasn't any particular, author that I didn't love, but I was absorbing books voraciously from the library. Anything that's title or that's storyline, um, it you know, was exciting and expanded this universe that I'm living in. I'm going to throw in there. I'm a Pisces, so I'm always dreaming. I'm in dreamland. I probably walked to school and was lucky that I didn't trip or get bumped into anything or get run over, because I would basically be walking from home to school and back, you know, in this bubble of imagination, imagining things about the trees dancing, pretending I was Dorothy, and I was going along the yellow brick road and finding all my comrades, my cohorts. So no particular author really at this point comes to mind. It's just um, the gift, the blessing of the stories that were available to me. I didn't really think at that point about the particular authors, just the wonderful stories that they told. So unfortunately, a lot of them may remain unknown unless I unearth them again. But I am thankful for those invisible teachers.
Yeah, I had a good selection of nursery tales and fables and children's storytelling books when I was a kid. And I remember the Aesop's fables because not only did I have a written version, but I also had records of the Aesop's fables read by a marvelous voice actor. And I kept thinking, oh my God, if one day, I could be a writer also. That yearning came early to me. Let me ask you this. Obviously with school, there's writing that you have to do. When did you find yourself writing for fun? Do you remember?
Um, Somewhere in between those times, and going back to something you said, going back to the last question. Aesop fables was very much a part of my childhood. That was something that I was exposed to, that my parents, I guess, kind of approved. They wanted to make sure I was getting reading that they believed at that time were appropriate for children. So alongside that was uh, Hans Christian Andersen and of course Grimm, which I was afraid of both stories. They had an element in them that was a little scary for a child, but I think
Yeah, the grim
that
stuff
is
is very,
that's
very sad. Yeah.
yeah, but for me that's kind of a proof that of that ability, give the child the ability to kind of read that out, be there to answer any questions that they may have. But usually they're wonderfully able to work these things out and ask you questions as well if there's an adult to do that with. So going back to your current question, in between doing a lot of those things in school, and I remember we started writing papers, you know, um, latter half, like middle of primary school, and a lot in secondary school, and of course in college. And I think kind of as a stress reliever or a sort of balance, alongside writing these necessary projects, essays, papers that we had to turn in. I also made kind of like a project of researching it and making stories out of those too. It was an interesting topic. I would invariably end up being that person who's like, oh, well, that is an exciting little tidbit I found out. And I think this is something where you and I connect. So that's why I'm so enchanted by your own stories, Rick, is because you like to pull out these little known facts about things that people don't usually look at, or maybe they're not as interesting to them. But it's so fascinating to me. And from there, I'd make a story. So I think in between all the necessary, so-called necessary writing, I was definitely weaving in these little stories that I would be, scrolling away and trying to finish or rethink um, what I could do with them. But basically, they're just for my own enjoyment.
Did you have any teachers in school or college that encouraged you that said, "Oh, you need to do this. This is amazing."
Oh my goodness, yes. Um, in elementary school, the turning point was fourth grade. It was my last teacher here in the US before we moved to the Philippines. Um, she really terrified me. She was, if you envision in your mind, she was the type of teacher who was, she was a tall, silent, very stoic woman. She wore, horn-rimmed glasses. She had her hair up in a bun. She always came to school, perfectly dressed. She was always dressed formally, I guess you could say. Not she was never wearing t-shirts. She was never, one of those teachers that they're ready for everything, so they wear the most comfortable thing to deal with kids. This woman wore skirts and sensible heels and her hosiery, her stockings. So I was a little scared of her. She would um, show as much approval as somebody who's really kind of keeping to themselves would, but she would never really be overt about liking anybody. Um, though I guess in a way, when I look at it, she was kind of nurturing me because she would always, put me in groups or put me in the reading time where there would be books that she'd like to expose the whole of the class to. But before I left for the Philippines, she gifted me with a book, and it was the classic uh, Carlo Collodi Pinocchio, which up until that time I was only exposed to Pinocchio via Disney. And my goodness, the storytelling in that, the depth of the story, the breadth of the story, where what it actually was a sort of metaphor for underneath, the children's story was amazing. And now, I had the opportunity to be able to look up, the story behind it again, and they were revisiting. I think it was recently a anniversary of Pinocchio, of the writing of Collodi's Pinocchio, and yeah, it was very very timely, and I see now why Benicio del Toro. I think it's no, not Benicio del Toro. Goodness, what is the name of the that wonderful director of Shape of Water? Goodness, it's
Del Toro. I think
mm,
you're right. I think you're right.
is it okay?
So,
When he came up with his animated version of Pinocchio, I believe he very much was wanted to talk about the story and the setting that it was in. Talking about fascism and the war. So it was truly fascinating. Um, I kind of lost my train of your question. I know I
that's
wanted
okay.
to
That's
add
okay. I was asking
something
about
along there, but yeah,
teachers that might have been supportive. No problem.
yeah. Oh, teachers, yes. And then so in college, I kind of got the sort of tough love. I had a that much support from in the past. People would say, and I understand a lot of it was because I went through my secondary school in the Philippines, and so they were just wowed by the fact that I wrote almost what they considered nearly perfect English, essays. So I guess I may have gotten a little lazy, and I would just kind of BS my way through writing a lot of these things when now that I think of them. And he was not for any of that. So, you know, realizing that I wasn't really fooling anybody, most of all myself, if I wanted to really lean into this writing, um, no shortcuts. And that's always stayed with me throughout. I would sometimes not really agonize over a piece, but I would really take my time and sit down with a piece that I'm writing because of that structure from Mr. Pointer about, I am not trying to prove myself to anybody, but I am trying to be honest to myself, and that was really important. And then finally, this wasn't even really a academic or educational situation, but there was a time, good 15 years ago, that I was already writing, but I wasn't doing anything with it. I was just setting it aside, showing it to a few people. I was working as a waitress at a little mom and pop, and a gentleman would come in every so often. He would just sit there quietly and order the same thing, and he always came very dapper looking too. He would sit there and just absorb while he was eating, but not really converse with anybody. Um, and then I guess he would hear me tell like stories during time I would be on a break. I never really interacted with him. Um, and he one time, approached me when I was taking his order. He's like, "Oh, I hear you talking about all this writing. Are you going to where are you going with that? It seems like you're very passionate about it. What do you want? What direction do you want to go with this poetry? How do you want to supplement that, that learning? Do you want to really pursue something that is meaningful to your writing journey?" Um, and it's funny because later on I found out from the owner of the cafe that was and I knew this. I know that Coach Carter is local. He taught at Richmond High. It was Coach, and so knowing that now, seeing how he is, he had such a mentorship role. That was kind of like something that automatically clicked in his brain, and he wanted to apply that to everybody and anybody. So that was like a double lesson that I got from that. Just also a further reiteration of um, doing the utmost I can with my poetry for myself. Making it truly a craft, but also that that fact of passing that forward, trying to mentor other people, trying to nurture other people who are trying to also go in that path.
It's funny you mentioned fourth grade. I had a most interesting teacher in fourth grade myself. This woman, also very severe, very, very formally dressed, very tight hair, Mrs. Seitz. She also had an extraordinary temper. And to say that she didn't
Mhm.
suffer fools, she was stern to a fault, I'm afraid. And a friend of mine who was more of an artist type and not inclined to take her storm and drang too seriously. Basically, when she
Mhm.
was confronted with the fact that she hadn't learned her lesson, Robin just sort of laughed about it, and the teacher got so incensed that this is when we had a desk attached with an underbar to a chair. So it was a desk chair piece, right? Table flipped
I
up.
remember
These
those.
were heavy. The teacher literally lifted it up over her head and threw it at my dear friend who I
Oh,
had a crush on. Thank God, Mister went out through the window, fell 2 stories to the playground below. Well, at that point, Robin, fearing for her safety, took off. And it was about a half an hour later that they came back with the principal, who was just an incredible spirit. brought them back arm in arm, and things were settled. But the point I wanted to make about Mrs. Seitz, my very strict, very stern, very reserved teacher, at the end of the year, a lot of teachers play games when they release the kids, right?
Yeah.
She was going to take yes, a lot of classes were dismissed early. No, she was doing the full day. We were there with her full day. And at the end, she's dismissing us for summer break alphabetically. Okay. And I'm an S. I'm down there at the end, right? Well, she skips me and goes to the end. And I'm like, oh my God, what last torture will she give me? Oh
What
my
more?
God. She takes me to the back of the room, opens up her closet of confiscated goodies, right? She's taken from kids over the year. She hands me a great history book, a great European history book, a baseball glove, which didn't mean anything to me, and said, listen, you have a good summer. I couldn't have been more shocked. I was just stunned. She actually liked me. Of course, I couldn't have told you that, but that was the fact. So I had a great fourth grade myself, ultimately. Okay, next question.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
There's a kind of a range of thinking. Some poets believe you have to write every day just to polish your craft. Other people say no, 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 no. You can't force it. Write only when inspiration comes. Those are the pure moments when inspiration fills your heart and soul. Then you should write. Where do you fall in that continuum from you got to write to only when? How is that for
I
Phynne Belle?
think I I think I'm running so, somewhere in the in between. I do truly advocate being able to write on a daily basis, but I have really broadened that definition of the physical act of writing. Sure, there is some lovely alchemy. There is something beautiful happening when you lay it down on the page and have that discipline to do so, even if it's dashing off a few lines. So I do really try to honor that. I do try to do that. It isn't really easy, and sometimes, yes, the inspiration is very could be very sparse sometimes, and it can seem a little forced. So I lie in that in between to um, to understand and to acknowledge my intuition. If I am not doing the physical act of my writing practice on a daily basis on a particular day, I am feeding it some other way where it is essentially writing. It is um, attending to something else that is associated with my writing, to the craft. Either if it is reading something, reading other authors that may inspire, or even just taking a tiny a mini field trip, or sitting in meditation and observing what um, emerges at the end of that session, communing with myself, communing with nature. I used to go around the city when I was able to hop the BART train and go to San Francisco, and I would take um, film, um, old school photography, and always make it black and white because I want to see what would appear. By no means was I professional, but I would use just the old janky standard camera, standard Nikon or Canon. Not really know about a lot about the apertures, about the light and dark, but I had an innate sense of what it is, and I just really didn't want to capture something where I knew what the outcome was. I wanted to be surprised with the outcome. I wanted the to take the photo, be interested in what I see, take the photo, and then when it is, developed later on, to find the revelation in that, because something usually comes out that I didn't see beforehand. Um, and I never knew really what to make of that, but I would try to incorporate that into my writing until it was worded beautifully. I attended the this online, uh, not workshop, but a talk between Ocean Bong and two artists, and he was talking about looking through the viewfinder of your old fashioned. He was likening his writing process to looking at the world through the old fashioned, viewfinder lens of the camera, where you had to put the cloth over the head and it was on a tripod, and then it had like the flash that really just like blew smoke, and it had the kind of um, chromo gelatin image, sepia, and then seeing what comes out in the periphery, because that's also part of the story, not just the subject, but everything else that appears, any demarcations, any imperfections, anything that wasn't supposed to be caught on the camera, on the film, was also caught there, and it becomes part of the story. So, um, am I writing on a daily basis? I feel like I am. It's not always the physical act of writing, but it is something that's always writing related. It's always something that feeds back into my craft, whatever it may be.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Do you find yourself addressing certain topics again and again, or is every moment unique?
There was a point where I think you could sort of say I didn't really have a good grasp on where I wanted to lend my voice to, or even the knowledge that I was lending my voice to anything. I thought I was just writing about, what I see and chronicling it faithfully like a scribe, until that knowledge was furthered by um, seeing that maybe I do have a voice. Maybe people are actually listening. Maybe it is making this minute difference that metastasizes, that grows with each person that voice is distributed to, that message is, passed on to. And so, there are certain points where I feel I need to, it has to be really specifically on a theme, really specifically on a topic. Um, I'm the kind of person who will claim to all the way to Hades and up to high heaven that I don't write love poetry, but I do. But I do, and I've made peace with that, because I think a lot of our actions, a lot of what we do, and it's not just about romantic love, come back to that theme, that concept of putting love out into the universe, whatever way that it materializes or manifests. And so I really strongly go back to that. I don't try to run away from writing about um, love, because when I'm writing about love, I'm really writing about a lot of other things in my life. I'm really writing about everything else I observe, because it all starts. And if I deny myself that, I'm denying what the root of what motivates me to want to make a difference with people, what motivates me to have this empathy and this wanting to spring into action, and not necessarily right wrongs, but to make the wrongs visible and see what we all can do together to enact a change for it. Hopefully, I know that's a little hopeful thinking, but
No, that's
sometimes
marvelous.
those words, thoughts can move a lot, can move the needle quite effectively.
Absolutely. I agree completely. Um, do you think of yourself as a social commentary type poet or only when necessary?
I I would I hesitate to put that to stand underneath that label, only because I truly respect, and I give a lot of props to the people who are able to go in and out of a particular relevant topic and just really talk the hell out of it. in their poetry, in their writing. Um, and so I guess the answer for me to that is really kind of simple, maybe not really direct, but really simple. If I feel I could say something adequately on a certain topic, I will. I will. It may be couched in a lot of metaphor. It may not even appear to anybody to be, a direct message regarding um, a particular thing that I feel passionately about or that I was moved or enraged about. But it does exist. Just may be something more of a subtle touch. So um, I don't know ultimately how effective that makes it. Um, but it is something that I try to relay in my own voice, however it's received, and hopefully it is received in a way that. And I always say this a lot, whether it be when I'm teaching a workshop or even when when somebody asks me about a particular piece I did, and I said that if it raises more questions, not only for the people who are hearing it, but also raise more questions for me, then I think that I was able to do an effective job in that way, where the questions now erupt and they need to be they truly need to be answered. So I'm hoping for that. If it doesn't enact any sort of questioning on any end, if it just dies right there and nobody discusses it afterwards, then maybe that's a point where I would like to to look back at it myself and say, well, where can I insert a little bit of um, the discomfort in there? I think a little bit of discomfort should exist in any poetry or any piece that's worth reading or hearing, because it transfers, I think, from the person who writes the poem or who reads the poem into the people who are listening to it, into it, and it distills that fervor. It distills that need to make those words and thoughts into something that is um, more of an action, more of an act of, um, of advocacy.
Thank you. Next, you've been participating in these international Zooms, even hosting many. Has anything about these experiences surprised you?
The wonderful sense of community and acceptance. I don't know if part of that measurement, part of that recipe was us being thrown together during a really, frightening time, and finding, like spirits, like minds. But I think it has quite a bit to do with that. I have to admit that prior to attending, or necessarily having to attend these Zooms during that period of time, and what coalesced afterward, that we continue to realize that, our friends our fellow writers, our fellow creatives are not just local. They're not a local circle. They suddenly become global, and we don't want to lose that connection. Um, but I wasn't having that experience prior. And partially, I think it was a kind of mirroring effect. What I put forward into sharing in community with people in real life when I would go to attend these events. Maybe that was reflecting back on me. What if I didn't feel that what I had to say was important, if I didn't feel that what my story was worthy, then that kind of that energy came off and bounced back at me, and I would be projecting this kind of rejection back upon back onto the people hearing it and back upon myself. And somehow whether I started it or it started from, externally and became internal, was just the fact of this profound enthusiasm for what I had to say. And suddenly, people are opening their ears and their hearts and their spirits to listen fully. And for me, that was a big thing. That was a big thing to know that there wasn't just an empathetic ear, but there was also a sincere understanding and voices that wanted to speak back on that topic. So yeah, that's what I got out of them. That's why I continue on, and that's why I want to also give back and I create events of my own. So to continue to nurture that for myself and for the people who surround me, who are now my own chosen family, my creative family. Um, it's very important for me. That's what I took away, and I want other people to have that same safe space to do that to flourish in their art.
I know I've talked to several artists who don't yet participate in the Zoom space. And I try to explain,
Hmm.
you'll never feel so appreciated. You will never hear or feel so listened to as you will in these Zoom spaces. And I'm happy to say I encourage several people to join them, and they've joined and flourished. And I have a lovely neighbor who is in well into her seniorness, let's say, and she had never read in public. She had never shared beyond a small circle of friends, never done a public reading. And I encouraged her to watch one of our Zoom spaces and then actually got her to
Hmm.
participate. And she has so blossomed in this. I couldn't agree with you more. You're absolutely right. There is a fellowship, a community in the Zoom space for these poets. There's an appreciation. And I've never seen that anything like that level of appreciation in all the different places that I've done readings, and I've done readings for 50 years. So I agree with you
Hmm.
completely. Okay, getting down to the end of the last questions. If a young person came to you and said, I write, but I don't know about reading to people. I don't know. Should I just put all this stuff aside? And they ultimately say to you, is poetry worth it? What do you say?
I would really tell them to when the time is right, you will ease into what you feel is the right space for you, the right, the right fit. It really isn't for everybody to go out there and read. And I think partially understanding that, not feeling that there is pressure to do that, if that is not feeding their art and feeding them, creatively and I guess spiritually, and it's not bringing back to the whole of what makes what compromises not compromises what comprises them, then for them to really sit down with it and think how um, this sharing of is beneficial, if it's part of their journey. Maybe um, if they are happy to be staying for how many so years, but then continuing to write, not necessarily putting a structure around it or putting a box and saying it's poetry and that's its label, and I have to go by so and so and so steps because I see other people doing that. No, each one of our journeys are individual, are very unique, are snowflakes. They're all vastly different and very beautiful. But the one thing is that, and this is going to sound corny as all hell, but it still rings true. If you go to sleep thinking about these thoughts that you would like to put down on page, or that you would like to share with other people, in some sort of concrete and tangible way. If you wake up and you're brushing your teeth and having breakfast, um, and these thoughts continue to grip you, and there's no way to just be the vessel. You want to be also the vessel that overflows into other people, and you continue throughout your day and several days and every day doing that. Then yes, you are a poet, and yes, poetry or writing or creativity is that path that you really want to pursue, because it does have that um, echoing effect, that reverberation that goes out into the universe, but also comes back to you. It's this never-ending ebb and flow, um, of something truly necessary, something truly essential for a poet, at least. Maybe I'm coming at it from that perspective. Maybe people don't feel as passionately of it, and they just want to write something and write prolifically. But um, that that would be my answer. That's what sustains. That's what sustains when a lot of things are doubtful, and you don't really know what direction you're going in, and why you're even writing, and why you're even wanting to share your poetry, or to be a part of something creative. That would be it. If it sits and stays with you, and it won't shut up. It needs to be told.
Yeah, when you can't not be a poet, it's a great time to be a poet.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Last question, my dear. What makes a good poet?
Mm. It goes back to that previous question and answer that I earlier in this chat of ours, um, and it really goes back to being honest with yourself and finding that truth. I think whether we like it or not, or whether we realize it or not, um, we are the we are holding the truth. We're holding the most unadulterated, pure essence of truth, and what we're going to do with it. It doesn't matter so much. I think the trappings of it are, what we surround it with, the beautiful metaphors, the craft with the words. But if all that is existing, and the heart and soul of it, which I believe is going back to relaying a truth, if that doesn't exist, then I feel like it is a hollow casing, and at the center of it, there isn't anything existing. And for me, that dissipates. That doesn't stand the test of time going forward for ourselves, and for other people hearing the poetry. um, we began to see that. We began to see why we may disconnect with a piece, or why it doesn't resound with us, why we don't think about it again, um, because it becomes just so much of a stringing of pretty words, or bright images, and nothing else. So pursuing that truth, and really fervently wanting to commit to that, to be honest with yourself and honest with the people who are going to hear it, um, despite the bit of discomfort that may exist in between, or how it may be received. That that courage, and that tenacity to want to relay that. I think that's, for me, the most important. The words are surprisingly secondary. The way that it's delivered, or the way it's written, or the beauty of it, um, is a close secondary, but it's if the seed of that truth is not present, if it's not intact, um, then yeah, again, it floats out into the ether and is kind of forgotten.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. Now comes the fun part. Now we get to hear some of what Phynne Belle writes. So I
I
would
love.
urge you to read some of the longer ones that you don't get a chance to do, maybe in the 3 to 4 minute kind of vein. My dear, the floor is yours. Read any of your pieces you'd like to read. We've got 15, 20 minutes if you'd like. Floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Rick. Um, so I wanted to start off with a poem titled Spinner. And the reason why it's called Spinner, it is a play on the mythology of Arachne, which was popping up every once in a while this year, in different stories I would read, or the references to the the protagonist, in the story, and how maybe she was done, dirty by how the story was told, and seeing it from her perspective. But also kind of when I was constructing this poem, marrying it to this idea of a relationship. It could be romantic or however you want to look at it, but it's a relationship that comes out at the end, woefully uneven, and um, those connecting threads, the threads of the weaving. How do they? How does one sever themselves from it? So this is called Spinner. I want to witness myself today, easing into a soft realization at first, a grace entry into meeting with reality. I breathe and see my chest rise. I breathe and hear the sound as a sigh inward, released with a steady wind. I feel, I feel, I feel my shoulders lower, not sad, not admission of defeat, acknowledgement of what is and what cannot be. I know the fiber of my loving, craving, wanting is last bit of connection snagging, but I do not yet know where I pick and tug at the correct thread and be done. I am Hephaestus to a vanity that I would forge something pure. It would be the sorcery of what carved you protection, smoothed out hurt, brought love, a guard, the new foundation. I watched the wood as it built up and righted itself. I braced along with it, curved to its will. I was there to press my back into it, hold it up, carry it. I am Atlas now, weary, back warped gratefully. I was there, weaving the cloth out of thin air from conception, a whole careful metered out preparation of making two parts, one, a practice of halt and restart and halt at your pace, at your command. We began by soaking a raw love coded in hesitation, rinsing residual of relationships past, clinging stubbornly, staining fingers, sudsing a wish of something envisioned brand new again. My heart too soft awash to corrode. We move to and are swallowed in the enormity of parting the wool of me, of you, of us, hoping me here spindle wan, goddess generous, and you distaff of the fates, manipulating beginning, middle, and end. Me here still twisting nettled thread, hoping we could spin it beautiful, spin it love, hand in hand together. We were never meant to reach that end point. I am not Arachne, clever maiden, weaver of something out of nothing. I am not Arachne. I am not Arachne on my own. It is here Only here we become a creature cleaved, a fleeting union. We, my ill-conceived twin flame, we, we are Arachne. I, the clever spinner of devotion, and you and your hubris will challenge the old gods. I am the fates now. I find where the thread gives way and sever my heart's sustaining cord. The unraveling of us making one into two and separate once again becomes certain. It's the process of stepping off the retaining frame and walking away.
Bravo,
Thank
bravo.
you. All right. So I did talk about Miss Miss Ellison, fourth grade teacher, um, and recently there was a prompt or a theme for an open mic that asked to talk about the educators who made or the teachers um, who made a difference in our lives. So I wrote these three tankas for Mrs. Ellison. It's titled Tankas for Miss Ellison, fourth grade, Federal Terrace, 1981. No gold foil stars to grace the black slate, no gumdrop promise sweeten regard. Old tomes touch both heaven and earth. Impending collision, iceberg blue, a patient paramour. We sank below, words floated salvation. I remember the ghost cat. Collodi's wooden child, first a disagreeable, contrary twiglet. From pine to flesh, a human journey from dark to enlightenment. All right.
Very nice.
This year and the last has been a revisiting and writing about my grief journey and being able to finally put words into it and talk about um, remembering my mom and not remembering the sad last moments, but rather coming to that point where I'm remembering a lot of times, and they're ample. These times, and I feel blessed that these times were ample. Remembering my mom at her fullest and full of life and bringing joy and being joy. And so this is titled Diyosa ng Kasaganaan, the goddess of plenty or the goddess of abundance. My Mama Luby laughed the rising sun, full belly rich into the still, dark nestle of the pigeon coop, startling its carousel navy and morning gray residents. My Mama relieved the swaying bamboo rack of its gleaming stiff whites, arranged them, gap-toothed, even upon the clothesline, shifted their curtain of starchy cloth, shifted clouds from forming, from brewing their storms above head. My Mama, siren calling, teeming seas of cats in her wake, waves of hunger rising with response in husky pharaoh voices. Feed us, mermaid queen. They rejoin in asynchronous chorus, tempo lulls, tempo feverish. My Mama, Pied Piper ballerina, choreography of fingers swirl in yesterday's toasted rice rind, in abundance of bronze scales still fall, in transparent curved comb of naked fish bone. Rejoice, their murmur swells and washes over their numbers. Today we are such well-fed gents. My Mama, Diwata, summons the rainfall now at will, Libra balance of silver full moon Flangana, gracing her left hip, wooden ladle, divining stick aloft in her right palm. The thirsty soil prayed through the night to be quenched. Anituntabu, moody fickle goddess, their fervent whisper ripples the ground. Will you be the face of kindness on this day? And I want to just share maybe one more poem.
Okay.
And so this one is, I guess, another one that brought my mom to the foreground and made me think about her. Um, I had recently had the pleasure of coming across and learning about a British Malaysian artist named Karen Ko, and one of her pieces that she created called Fragments One really spoke to me. Um, it was a visual that was repeated almost as if it was a photo print of a blue dress, a simple kind of loose blue dress. I was told later on that it was the national costume, the national dress of Malaysia. But it very much looked to me, probably because of the Southeast Asian influence, it looked to me like the dusters that my mom would wear, a duster being this very thin linen cloth or cotton shift that women, especially in the countryside, would would wear while going about their chores in the humidity and the 100 and 204 degree weather, especially during the hot season. So that image, just that image, it made me think of my mom and her beautiful, colorful dusters. She was always so proud of, no matter what she was doing, uh, she would be wearing these lovely, lovely printed dusters. Um, so this is called Blue. If my mother's country girl dusters wore their homesickness on the outside, they would dye and stain her body blue, seep into her bloodstream, a truer, bluer than blue sea here now, a bird bone golden brown woman, heart pumping indigo through veins and out arteries, each past a purging, a divergent dilution, a cleansing of history. They would seep out life force fluid and flood the kitchen floor, a further shedding of abandoned homeland, an amalgamation of colonized milk, pre-introduced, remixed, parts uneven measure. What is yours is mine, folded in with each stir, each stab. What is ours was never meant for you, for your kind. You see, a mixture is never equal parts. It is invention, ingenuity, adaptation becomes accosting, appropriating, claiming, conquering. If my mother had worn her country girl dusters on the outside, stepped out of doors, sashaying the stars and rays caught in their hands, waved them like wings of a cooped-up dove, heart stirring, kumikinang na bandera ng bayan minamahal, blue field aloft, buoyed for a moment upon the current, the stifling air of land of the free and the brave, what then would follow? A battle cry, singing in a lilting key of illusory peace, a bird clad in slow drifting blood sky, spangled star bursting stratosphere may still be led astray, blinded, following the birth and death of a cruel father son. Thanks so much, Rick.
Beautiful. I try to offer my poet guests at least one poem of mine that I think speaks to the lovely work that you've done. So I'm going to read this. This is a tribute to mothers, to my mother, my wife
Mm.
as mother, to all mothers. This is called The First Gifts. Yes, you welcomed those babes at your breast, gave them from your own life sustenance, thought first of them, their pleasure, their pain, their needs, then some other, then yourself. brought them through the most holy, sacred gate they will ever enter into the world and into a human life. It can be readily said, you gave them the first gifts. Before the gods at the cradle round bestowed those precious others, you clothed them in flesh, gave them their first form. What cells and man and fashion could give, you gave first. Before your gifts there was nothing, and your giving self made every other giving possible. When the first cry is heard, it calls your name. When each searching hand first reaches out, it reaches out for yours. When you press the tiny lips to your breast and smell those first tender breaths, those sweet garden scents are meant for you alone. As tiny fingers begin the long, lonely search, they search first for you. Never is this new being more beautiful than when seen with your eye. Never is the kind of blessing given than that given from your eye and your heart. No wonder the mother is so universally blessed. No wonder such special blessedness belongs first and last to mothers. She's given so much of her flesh and her heart, the first gifts. Thank you, Phynne Belle, for the poet, the artist, the woman that you are, the mother that you are. Thank you. And thanks for
Thanks
joining
for
us
the
here at
family.
Poesy.
Thank
Have a
you, and thank you for
wonderful,
the gift of that platform. You too. Take good care.
okay. Bye bye, my dear. An honor to have you with us.
Thanks so much for the invitation. Take good care. Mwah.